People often say I grew up in a house full of wealth. Maybe that's true. But to me, wealth was never the expensive curtains or the long driveway or the marble floors. It was my father. I lost my mother when I was 8. At that age, I didn't understand the meaning of death, only the meaning of absence. One day she brushed my hair before school, and the next day she was gone. I think a part of my father died with her, but the part that remained, that part lived entirely for me. He became everything I needed, everything I didn't even know I needed. My father cooked for me burnt eggs at first, then perfect omelets. He dressed me for school, sometimes mismatching ribbons, but always with the softest hands. He took me to school every morning and never once came late to pick me up, not once. Our house was big, but it was just the two of us. No maids, no cooks, no drivers. People thought it was strange. They whispered that a man of his status should have a full house of workers. But he would always say, "I won't let anyone raise my daughter for me. I won't let anyone hurt her." He never remarried. Not because he didn't have options, believe me. Women flocked around him like bees around hibiscus. But he didn't trust anyone with my heart. Not after losing my mother. Growing up, I thought all fathers were like him, patient, gentle, protective, willing to twist their entire lives into new shapes just to make their child feel safe. It wasn't until I became older that I realized mine was rare. A once-in-a-lifetime kind of man. He aged beautifully, like the slow, soft fade of a sunset. By the time he turned 60, his hair had turned snow white, but his laugh still sounded like home. Even when I was already 30, working, independent, living a life he helped me build, he still rushed into the kitchen every morning before I woke up. I used to tease him about it, but he would just smile and say, "Let me take care of you while I can." I didn't know his "while I can" was running out. He died at 65, peacefully, too peacefully. I found him that morning, sitting on his favorite armchair, as though he had only fallen asleep. His glasses were still on. The newspaper had slipped off his lap. I touched his hand. It was cold, and in that moment, the world felt too big, too empty, too loud. I didn't cry immediately. I just sat there beside him, my fingers wrapped around his, and whispered, "Daddy, it's okay. You can rest now. I'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. Not really. When we buried him, it felt like the ground swallowed the last part of my childhood. That house, our house, felt like a shell without him. Every room reminded me of something he did for me. Every corner held a memory. For 30 years, he was my guardian, my teacher, my mother and father in one body, my quiet strength. And suddenly, I was alone, or so I thought, because something happened not long after he died. A few months after my father's burial, when the condolences had stopped, the visitors had faded away, and the house had grown unbearably quiet, his immediate sister arrived unexpectedly at my gate. She came with her daughter, my cousin, who was 27 years old. I recognized my aunt immediately. She hadn't changed much. Her bold voice, her colorful wrappers, the way she always walked as if the road belonged to her. But her daughter Evelyn, I had only seen her a handful of times growing up. She had grown into a beautiful, slim young woman with long braids and a shy smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They told me they came just to visit. Just for a week, they said. I remember how my aunt hugged me so tightly I could feel her heartbeat. She said she had been meaning to come since the funeral, but things had been hard. She didn't go into details, and I didn't ask. Maybe because I was lonely. Maybe because I wanted the presence of family. Maybe because grief had softened every part of me, including the parts that should have asked questions. I welcomed them with open arms. I gave them the guest room at the end of the hallway. I cooked for them the first few days because I didn't want them to feel like strangers. I took them out shopping, sightseeing, places my father used to take me. Evelyn, my cousin, acted grateful. My aunt acted comfortable. I didn't see any reason to suspect anything. Not then. Over the next few weeks, I spoiled them without thinking. I paid for their hair at the salon. I bought them clothes, expensive ones. I stocked their room with everything they needed. I slipped money into my aunt's palm whenever she sighed too heavily. I even bought Evelyn a new phone when she admired mine a little too loudly. It felt good at first to share, to care, to feel like I wasn't alone in that big house. But their 1 week visit slowly stretched. Unnoticed at first. A week became 2. 2 became 4. 4 became 3 months. 3 months quietly became 6. And before I realized it, 6 had melted into a full year. Then 2 years. They were still there. They settled into the house like plants that had taken root. They rearranged certain things, small things at first. My aunt started keeping her shoes near the back door. Evelyn's hair products took over the bathroom counter. They stopped asking before cooking in the kitchen. They invited people over when I was at work and never mentioned it afterward. And I let it go every single time because I told myself, they're family. I shouldn't chase family away. But the truth was deeper than that. The truth was, I was afraid of being alone again. Afraid of walking around that huge, silent house and hearing nothing but my own footsteps. Afraid of the emptiness my father left behind. So I swallowed every discomfort, every suspicion, every uneasy thought, and I let them stay. Then one morning, a morning I will never forget, everything shifted. I was in my room preparing for work, smoothing down my hair in the mirror. I had just picked up my handbag when I heard a knock on my door. It wasn't a light, uncertain knock. It was firm, deliberate. My aunt. I told her to come in. She stepped inside slowly, as if she had rehearsed the movement. She wore one of the wrappers. I bought her blue with gold prints, and her slippers dragged slightly against the tile. She didn't smile. She didn't greet me like she usually did. Instead, she went straight to the wooden chair by my dresser and sat down with a heavy sigh. "Tenny," she began, clearing her throat. "Please don't be angry." My hand froze on my handbag strap. She looked down at her hands, as though the words were written on her palms. "I know we have stayed long," she said slowly, "but you know my husband left me and Evelyn. We don't have anywhere else to go." I blinked. I didn't interrupt. I didn't trust my voice. She lifted her eyes to meet mine. "You understand, don't you?" she added. "We can't just leave. We can't." My heart tightened, not because of what she said, but because of what I knew. My father, before he died, had given her more than enough money. Money to start over, money to build a business, money to secure a place of her own. He had told me himself, not proudly, but worried. He said, "Your aunt is not the most careful person, but I will do what I can." And now here she was sitting in my room, pretending to be helpless, pretending to have nowhere to go. Yet she had never once told me what she did with the money my father gave her. She never even mentioned it. Something sank heavily in my stomach, a realization I had been too soft, too kind, too lonely to see before. But I didn't speak yet. I just stared at her, waiting for what she would say next. When my aunt finished talking that morning, her voice trembling, her eyes moist, her hands twisting the edge of her wrapper, I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there staring at her, trying to understand every layer of what she had said, and what she hadn't said. But in the end, my heart softened. It always does. I thought of my father, of how he never turned anyone away, of how he always said family is family, no matter how difficult. And because I loved him, because I wanted to honor the type of person he raised me to be, I took a slow breath, walked to where she sat, and placed my hand gently on her shoulder. "Auntie, it's okay," I said. "You and Evelyn can stay, as long as you need." Her relief was immediate. She dropped her head on my lap and burst into tears, thanking me repeatedly as though I had given her a second life. Evelyn joined us later, hugging me tightly and whispering, "Thank you, sister. We won't forget this." I believed them. I wanted to believe them. Days turned into weeks, and life went on. They settled even more comfortably into the house, and I did everything I could to make them feel welcome. I even let my aunt handle small errands. I added Evelyn to our health insurance. I gave them full access to the kitchen, the living room, everything. And then my aunt came to me with another request. She wanted Evelyn, her 27-year-old daughter, to work in my workplace, my father's company, the company I now had. My first instinct was to say no, not because she wasn't family, but because mixing family and business is dangerous. My father had always warned me about that. But my aunt pleaded. She cried. She reminded me how alone they were. She promised Evelyn would behave well, work hard, and respect everyone. And again, I couldn't deny them. Not with the way my heart had been raised. So I agreed. I got Evelyn a position. Not a high one, just something to help her build herself. Something she could grow from if she truly wanted to work. At first, she behaved well. She came early. She was polite. She greeted everyone. She acted grateful. But months later, everything changed. Both of them, my aunt and Evelyn, began behaving differently. Slightly at first, then boldly. They stopped calling me to join them for breakfast. They would cook, eat, laugh loudly in the dining room, and leave me out completely. At night, I would hear them setting the table for two, never three. There were days I walked into the dining room and found them already eating, not even looking up to greet me. My aunt would say, "Oh, we didn't know you were awake," even though they saw the lights on in my room. Evelyn would just smile without saying a word. They didn't wait for me anymore. They didn't involve me in conversations. They started whispering to each other the moment I entered a room. The change was sudden, sharp, and cold. Nothing like the grateful family I had welcomed into my life. What did I do wrong? Why are they acting like this? Did kindness weaken me? Or did it simply reveal who they truly are? The house that once felt peaceful with them began to feel tense, divided, strange. I could feel something shifting beneath the surface, something brewing. Then one afternoon, the company accountant knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable, almost afraid. "Ma, forgive me for saying this," he began carefully, "but your cousin has been requesting for company money, personal requests, several times." My heart dropped. I thanked him, dismissed him, and sat there in silence for several minutes, gathering myself. Later that evening, I confronted Evelyn. Her reaction was immediate, loud, defensive, disrespectful. And before I could fully process her words, her mother joined in, raising her voice at me in my own father's house. They accused me of embarrassing them, of overreacting, of treating them like outsiders. It was a scene I still struggle to forget. For days after that argument, the atmosphere in the house was poisonous. They walked around with loud footsteps, whispered whenever I entered a room, slammed doors more than necessary. But then unexpectedly they apologized. Evelyn came into my room with tears in her eyes, promising never to do it again. My aunt followed, nodding, swearing it was all a misunderstanding, saying they valued me, loved me, and would never intentionally hurt me. I wanted peace. I wanted to believe them, so I forgave them. Weeks passed. Things seemed to calm down. And then, something terrible happened. Because of the nature of my position at work, closing late had become normal for me. Most nights, I left the office long after everyone else had gone home. The corridors empty, the security lights casting long shadows across the compound. I always told myself it was temporary, that leadership demanded sacrifice. But one night, a night I will never forget, everything changed. I was driving home exhausted, my mind still tangled in reports and decisions, when I saw the headlights. A flash, a screech, a violent spin, then darkness. I woke up in the hospital, unable to feel my legs. The nurses told me they had already contacted my next of kin, my aunt. When she arrived with Evelyn, they both pretended to be frantic, breathless, overwhelmed by the news. They held my hands, stroked my hair, told me to stay calm. But the real test came when the doctor called my aunt into his office. He explained everything. My spine was damaged. I needed urgent surgery. Time was critical. They needed a family member to sign the consent form. When the doctor returned to my bedside alone, his expression told me something was very wrong. Your aunt refused to sign, he said quietly. My lips parted, but no words came out. She refused? Why? When I asked him what excuse she gave, he sighed. She said, you're too young to undergo such a major procedure, and the amount required was too much. Too much. The money I worked for, the money I earned, the money she had no right to approve or disapprove. Sadness washed over me so deeply it felt physical, heavier than the pain in my back, heavier than the bandages across my body. When she came back into the room, I begged her to sign, to stop wasting time, to remember I was the one lying broken on the hospital bed. I told her it was my money, my life, my future, and that she had no authority over it. After a long, tense moment, she finally agreed. The surgery happened, and it almost took my life. I remember drifting in and out, hearing voices, feeling cold, like my soul was being pulled away from my body. But somehow, maybe by God's mercy, maybe by fate, I came out alive. Alive, but changed. When I woke up after the operation, the doctor told me gently, you will not be able to walk for some months. His words settled in the room like dust. Heavy, unavoidable, final. And that was how the new chapter of my life began. I was discharged a few weeks after the surgery. My aunt and her daughter came to pick me up, acting concerned, holding my bag, pretending like they had been caring for me all along. When we got home, the first place I wanted to sit was my father's sitting room, the one he loved the most, the one filled with memories of his laughter and his voice. But the moment I rolled in, something hit me like a fresh wound. My father's picture, the large framed portrait on the wall, was gone. That wall had never been empty. That picture had never been touched. I turned to my aunt immediately. Auntie, where is Daddy's picture? She didn't look bothered. She didn't even pretend to search her memory. She just shrugged and said, he is dead and gone. We are the ones alive. The word stabbed me in the chest. I was angry, furious, but I was also helpless. I couldn't walk. I couldn't fight. I needed assistance for almost everything. So I swallowed my anger like a bitter pill. Days passed, and their behavior worsened. We would sit in the living room watching movies together, and when it was time to sleep, they would simply stand up and leave me there alone without helping me to my room. They gave me food only once a day, claiming they were busy or tired. They moved around the house like they owned it, like I was the stranger. But the worst, the most shocking betrayal, was something they did while I was still in the hospital recovering. They entered my room, opened my drawers, went through my files, and took every document that belonged to my father. The land papers, the deed to the house I was living in, everything. They sold the properties and were already planning to travel out of the country. I didn't find out from them. It was our family lawyer who told me. How did he know? One of the buyers turned out to be his friend. The friend saw the surname on the documents and immediately called the lawyer, asking, are these people really authorized to sell these properties? That was how the truth came out. From that moment, we began monitoring their movements quietly, waiting to know the exact day they planned to leave the country. The night before their flight, myself, our lawyer, and the lawyer's friend went to the hotel they had lodged in to arrest them. But before that morning, something miraculous happened. I woke up, and I stood, just like that. No warning, no struggle, no pain that stopped me. I was walking, earlier than the doctor said I could, but I didn't tell my aunt and her daughter. I didn't want them to know. I didn't want to give them any chance to harm me. The next time they saw me, I was standing on my feet, solid, strong, alive. Their mouths dropped, their eyes widened. They were speechless. Then they began to cry, begging, kneeling, weeping. But it was too late. I got them arrested and filed a case against them. All my father's properties were returned to me. Justice finally stood in my favor, and they were sent to prison for months.